for coming. Thanks for attending. We really appreciate it. We're recording now, so thanks to the folks who are watching on YouTube channel. Michaela, so great to see you. So great to have you here. And Michaela's a really interesting person because she is a CI alumni who started on a project that was a capstone that became a very long-term project for us, became her master's project. It's a very cool interdisciplinary project that we have going on at the university and has spawned all kinds of great things for Michaela. So happy to see you here, Michaela, and to have you be able to talk to students in our community. And yeah, very excited.
Cool, yeah, thanks for having me. It's really good to see you guys. I love the research station, as you know, has a soft spot in my heart. So I'm happy to do these kinds of things. And I'll go ahead and try and share my screen, hopefully successfully. All right, how's that? Cool. All right, so hi everybody, my name is Michaela. I am the conservation manager at the National Marine Sanctuary Foundation. And today is kind of a different talk than I normally do, but I'm going to try to cover my educational and career path so far in hopes that it will help a future student. And they're kind of intertwined, my educational path and my career path. So I'm going to kind of talk about all of that in one thing. And then also in that is how the Channel Islands and especially the Santa Rosa Island Research Station has kind of shaped my career path and my career goals moving forward. I'm going to talk a little bit about marine debris on the Channel Islands, but not too much. And then my current role at the Sanctuary Foundation and our conservation programs there. All right. So how I got here, I went to school for a long time. I could be a doctor technically, just because of how much time I spent in school. So I grew up in Oxnard, California, graduated there in 2009. And so the islands have always really been an interesting place to me. I always kind of had an obsession with them growing up. And I never really knew that I could have a career in conservation until I was at CSU Channel Islands. And so to get to CI, I first went to Cal Poly, didn't really do so well in school there. I was a psychology major, ended up not liking it, decided to come back to Ventura and go to Ventura College for a couple of years. And when I was at VC, that's when I really figured out like, okay, I like science. I like environmental science. Maybe I'll be an environmental science teacher or a consultant or something. So I transferred to CI just with that kind of in mind, like, oh, I'll just see what happens after I get a degree there. And then after that, I worked for the Santa Rosa Island Research Station as the project coordinator for the Marine Debris Project for about 4 years. Also during that time, or at the same time, I went to CSU Monterey Bay for my master's, and then I was a California Sea Grant Fellow, and then I did some research for Beacon, and then now I'm at the National Marine Sanctuary Foundation. So kind of a weird path, I guess. So yeah, I'll just kind of go into some of those things. So like I mentioned, I was at CI for 2 years and I studied environmental science and resource management. I was a transfer student there and I was actually classes with Aspen a lot. So it's cool to see her here today. And so even though I was only there at CI for 2 years as a transfer student, I really wanted to kind of like make the most of my experience there. And so with that, I tried to go to the island like as much as possible. Like any chance I could, I would try to go. And so in 2015, during that summer before I started my capstone project, I was the intern for the Santa Rosa Island Research Station. And through that internship, I got to work on the Cloud Forest Restoration Project, which is pictured here. This is the very beginning stages of it when we did some of the first plantings. It's cool to come back now and see it, 7 years later, and it's actually like taking off. So that kind of started my interest in restoration because I had some hands-on experience and I got that through the research station. And then after that, in 2016, after having a summer on the island, I realized like marine debris just came up for some, I don't really remember how, but I always just thought it was fascinating on the islands because you're just way out there and it's like, how does all this stuff wash up there and where is it coming from? How much of it is there, you know? And so that's what I realized I wanted to focus my capstone on that. And so did my capstone on marine debris and then on Santa Rosa and Santa Cruz Islands. And then the data from my capstone ended up securing funding from the NOAA Marine Debris Program to help make the project what it is now, which is more of a long-term project. And then after that, I got to become a research station employee, which was pretty cool. And then, so after I graduated from CI, I did one summer as a field technician working on Santa Cruz Island on the Argentine ant eradication project in collaboration with the Nature Conservancy and UC San Diego. And so I just put this in there because I wanted to highlight that even though I didn't really have a desire to work with ants at all, like I had no experience with ants, I wasn't into the insects so much. I just knew that I just wanted something in conservation. I wanted to be outside and I wanted to work on the islands. So I was like, sure, I'll do a field season. And it ended up being like one of the best things I did. I lived on the island all summer, made some really great friends, got to help disperse this bait via helicopter. That's what this bottom left photo is. And I got more connected with the folks that worked on Santa Cruz Island when previously I had mostly worked on Santa Rosa Island. So yeah, I just wanted to put that in there to show that like, if you can do a field season, like if you have time off between school or jobs, you want to make some extra money, like I would say go for it. You also get to spend a lot of time outside, and it was a really great experience. So then after I was on the Argentine ant eradication project, I then started my role as the project coordinator from 2016. And so here's just a little timeline of my involvement in the marine debris project, I guess, as it's going now. So 2015 was my capstone, and that was kind of this bottom left, or yeah, this bottom picture was one of my capstone pictures in like 2015 or 16. This was before we had the frame packs, and we would literally just haul off these giant bags like Santa Claus, and it was not good. So we've come a long way since there, which I'm happy to say. And also this top left photo is when it was just extremely windy, but we still had to go out there. And yeah, so really happy to say the project is still ongoing. And then I couldn't give a talk without talking about marine debris a little bit, especially on the research station side of things. So just a quick overview of the project and marine debris on the Channel Islands in general. But also, side note, I don't know if Joe has done one of these yet or not, Joe Forrest, but you should make him, or you should ask him to do one. See Aspen nodding her head. You should ask him to do one, and he'll go into more of the details of this project. But yeah, so basically, as we all know, marine debris is a global pollution problem. All the impacts that we see and are familiar with of marine debris, if you think of them in the context of remote islands, it kind of makes those impacts even more problematic. Because on islands, biodiversity is very high, logistics are really challenging, and then debris is known to accumulate on remote islands. And so the Channel Islands, even though they're close to the mainland, it's no different. There are large quantities of marine debris accumulating, and they have been for a while. And so it's important to monitor this stuff and kind of understand if there's any local sources we could mitigate, or just to understand the issue at a regional scale. And so just kind of getting more familiar with the area, I guess. So this is an interesting place to study marine debris because it's a transition zone between two major current systems. And so that causes really unique circulation patterns, seasonal upwelling, as well as high biodiversity. And coupled with that, in the geographic placement of the islands, it just allows for the islands to catch a lot of marine debris, kind of like a catcher's mitt. And so that, coupled with all the nearby debris sources of debris in the Channel Islands, you have really highly populated mainland coasts. You have a lot of harbors and watersheds that discharge right into the channel. And it's also home to successful commercial and recreational fisheries, as well as commercial shipping lanes, oil and gas exploration in the Santa Barbara Channel. So all of those factors make the islands a really, I guess, place that's prone to marine debris accumulation, even though they are federally protected as a national park and a national marine sanctuary. So this is kind of the issues that we're seeing if you kind of put all those factors together that I just mentioned. This is Sandy Point on Santa Rosa Island, which is a favorited spot by elephant seals, like where they like to haul out and hang out and stuff. And you can see they're just basically laying in trash. And so this photo was taken in like 2016, I think. It was one of the first ones we took. Since then, a lot of this debris that we're I'm pointing out with the yellow arrows has been removed, and not as much has accumulated since then, which is great. But this is just kind of showing like the issue of marine debris on the islands, and a lot about my background as well. And so that's what, like I mentioned, that's how this project got started. And although it started as my capstone and then a job, and then I used that in graduate school, I'm just very happy to see that it's still ongoing. And these were the objectives. They probably have changed a little bit since then, but basically it's three main things. We want to focus on removal, so removing as much debris as possible. Monitoring, so seeing if there's any trends that can help us lessen the amount of debris present. And then outreach, which is really important, so because not everyone can go to the island as often as we'd like. So just cultivating a community of stewards across age groups and disciplines, not just science, but also art and stuff like that. So that's the project in a nutshell that kind of propelled me through my undergrad and graduate education. And then, oh, sorry, I forgot to mention this. Through this project, we established 7 sites on Santa Rosa and Santa Cruz Island that are now being monitored pretty regularly, which is awesome. And a lot of the debris that we're seeing, it kind of directly mirrors high lobster fishing areas, both on the northwest side of Santa Rosa Island and on the south side of Santa Cruz Island at Yellowbanks. So those are areas that a lot of lobster traps have washed up, and we're finding as we continue to monitor the debris there is still large amounts of fishing related debris that's washing up on these beaches. And it's good to know that, because that's kind of like we know that where that trash is coming from. It's coming from the local fishery. So that's something that we can kind of work to change hopefully in the future. And so I meant to say, leading to this slide, is the Marine Debris Project has been just really great for me professionally, personally. Like, I learned so much since it started in 2015, and it propelled me through graduate school. So when I was hired as the coordinator in 2016, Cause, the former director of the research station, he asked me like, okay, are you thinking about graduate school? And I was like, honestly, no, like I didn't really think that that was for me ever. It wasn't until like working on that project, I realized, okay, this is something that I should do. And so I explored graduate school options, and I decided to go to CSU Monterey Bay to kind of get out of my Ventura, Santa Barbara County area bubble, just to kind of explore other parts of the state. And so I went to CSU Monterey Bay for 2 years, and I studied applied marine and watershed science, emphasizing in marine science. And this graduate program was awesome. Like, it connected me to other people working in the state, not in just coastal marine issues, but also in other stuff as well. And that's why I put this picture of the goats on there. I forgot I did that, but that was just a cool project. I got to help do this grassland restoration work, and we used goats to do that. And so it was just an experience that I would have never had, if I had not gone to graduate school. And it was also really focused on like management and how do we, not just science for the sake of science, but how does this information like inform decisions on how we manage these resources? And then also the policy that kind of helps shape those decisions as well. And so I was able to kind of also hone in my like data management and like data analysis skills and GIS through graduate school. And that allowed me to understand more working with the Marine Debris Project as well. All right. And then, so after I graduated in 2019, I decided like after that, I needed to work on other issues besides marine debris. I just kind of wanted to explore other things, especially in the realm of like coastal and marine resource management. And so that's when I decided to apply for the California Sea Grant Fellowship, as I was especially interested in climate change and coastal resilience efforts. And so I decided to apply for the Sea Grant Fellowship, and it gives basically recent graduate students experience like working in a state or federal agency for a year. And so I worked for the California Ocean Protection Council in their climate change program, starting in February 2020 through April of 2021. And so I moved to Sacramento for a month. I was there in February, and then COVID happened. So I was in the office for about 3 weeks, which was fun. And then I moved back to Ventura and did the rest of my fellowship remotely, but it was still a great experience. I learned a lot that I normally would not have. It gave me a really new perspective of just how policy works, especially at the state level. And just some background on OPC, which I didn't know until I was working for them, but OPC is a cabinet level agency. And so they inform the governor on coastal and marine policy, basically, and they give recommendations. And they also have a strategic plan for the entire state for 5 years. And it was really exciting because my first month at OPC, we were finalizing the strategic plan, and I got to see how like the final moments before it was released and approved by the entire council. So that was really cool. I got to work with the Secretary of Natural Resources and just kind of see how this whole process works. And through my job at OPC, I was also introduced to like just a different side of conservation and science and management that I was not previously used to, and that is like program management. And so the strategic plan basically has these goals that are set out, and then the staff of OPC essentially go out and try to meet these goals through different projects and stuff like that. And so being on the climate program or the climate change program, one of my responsibilities was to develop a coastal resilience grant program through Proposition 68 funding, which is a lot of, it's like, what is that? Like, what is Prop 68? I had no idea. But basically Prop 68 is a bond fund that voters issue, or a voter approved bond that gave OPC about $15 million to delegate into climate resilience projects. And so during my time as a Sea Grant Fellow, I got to give out $8 million in funding, in state funding, to different projects, all like advancing coastal resilience across the state. And so that was a really big project for me. And it also like showed me just how much work there is involved in administering state awards. And although it's tedious and kind of a pain sometimes, it's also like very rewarding to see these projects move forward. And so I learned so much just about the process in working with the state and everything involved there through my fellowship. And I would recommend this as well to anyone that's like interested in maybe like the policy side of things or more the management side of things instead of like the day-to-day science stuff. So yeah, that was the Sea Grant Fellowship, and that just kind of wrapped up a year ago, actually this month, which is crazy. And then also through that fellowship, I was able to make a lot of really great connections, some that led me to my current job now, and then another job that I had. So I'll kind of go into that right now. So after the Sea Grant Fellowship, I was able to connect with Beacon, which is the Beach Erosion Authority for Clean Oceans and Nourishment. And Beacon essentially is a regional sediment management agency that covers from Point Mugu to Point Conception. So all the sand in that littoral cell and coastal erosion, harbor dredging, stuff like that, that's all under Beacon's jurisdiction. And Beacon basically manages the coastline for the cities of Goleta, Santa Barbara, Carp, Ventura, Oxnard, and Port Hueneme, so just down the coast. And I was connected with Beacon through the Prop 68 project. We had granted out some funds through the Prop 68 Coastal Resilience Project to Beacon. And then after my time at OPC ended, I was offered a short-term contract with Beacon doing research and helping them understand some long-term trends in harbor dredging practices and also like just sediment management practices in general. And that all that information is going to inform their updated regional sediment management plan. So through my time at OPC, I got to work on so many different issues, and I wanted to work on regional sediment management and coastal resilience efforts. And then that connected me with Beacon, and that was another just really great experience, even though it was a little bit short. And so also I was able to work at Beacon because of my connection at CSUCI and the environmental science program. Kiki Patch is the director of science, or the chair of the science, something like that. She's involved with Beacon. And so I worked very closely with her and Mark Baylor at Beacon after my time at OPC, which was just really cool to kind of have everyone connected. And then, so I recently started at the National Marine Sanctuary Foundation. I started there in December of 2021. So I'm about 5 months in or so. Still feel like I'm learning new things like daily, learning a lot as I go. And so the National Marine Sanctuary Foundation is the official nonprofit partner to the federal marine sanctuary system. And they have been the official partner since 2001. And so the Sanctuary Foundation's role is pretty broad. We do a lot. And I didn't really realize how much we actually do until I was working for them, which I feel like just happens. But we work across all sanctuary sites and even outside the sanctuary system to implement different conservation and restoration projects, as well as outreach and education. And there's some other mission areas as well. So the foundation's mission areas, basically what we cover are community engagement. So bringing more people to the sanctuary, or bringing the sanctuary to others if possible, if they cannot, not everyone can dive or go out to the ocean. So just how do you engage the community in that sense? Education and outreach, which kind of goes along with that as well. And then conservation and restoration. And I highlighted that because that's what I primarily work on. And our conservation and restoration program is growing pretty quickly and changing. And so this is what we're working on now, but TBD if this will be the same in a year. But so it's a really exciting time to be at the foundation, just because we are kind of growing in so many different ways. But the three things that we primarily focus on in the conservation program are species conservation, restoration, and marine debris. So those are kind of my three main focus areas. And then just to talk a little bit about the different programs that we have at the foundation. One of the big ones right now is whale conservation. And so we have two main projects, or two main programs, and a lot of sub projects kind of under this mission area. But the first one being disentanglement trainings. And so unfortunately with COVID restrictions, we haven't been able to train any responders on disentanglement events since like 2018 or so. So the foundation is partnering with OPC, funny enough, and NOAA Fisheries Stranding Response Team to kind of host these two trainings. And there will be two trainings this year, hopefully when COVID restrictions are lifted more for federal employees, but one will be held at Channel Islands National Marine Sanctuary, so right in our backyard, and then the other one further north in Monterey. And so what the foundation will do in this is kind of convene all of the major partners together. We're going to send out invites to people that would like to be trained, that could be potential responders to these disentanglements. So then by the next time a disentanglement comes around after these trainings, we're more well equipped to go out and actually disentangle the whale. So that's really exciting, and those will probably happen in the fall, hopefully. And then another major program that we have is our Gear Innovations program. And so this kind of coincides with the disentanglement and why it's so important. But basically, we're focusing on the Dungeness crab fishery in California, so a little further up north. And we're testing ropeless pop-up gear in real fishing conditions with fishermen. So we're paying fishermen to go out and test 5 different types of ropeless pop-up gear systems and see if they work. And with that information, we can then submit a request to the Department of Fish and Wildlife to see, like, will you approve this gear to be used on a commercial level? So this is really important because there's been a lot of entanglements recently. For example, the fishery was supposed to be open at least another month or two, maybe longer, but it just had to be closed earlier. It just closed, like, I think tomorrow is the last day, because of its third entangled whale has just gone through the sanctuary, or gone through the fishery, and it's because of Dungeness crab gear. So when that happens, CDFW closes the fishery. And so this just kind of highlights, like, okay, we need to figure out a different type of gear, because especially with climate change, as conditions change, whales are going to start feeding a little bit closer to shore. And that just shows that there's going to be a higher risk of entanglement with that. And so if we work to kind of identify, like, okay, can we change the gear in order to lessen entanglements? It's going to be really important moving forward to both keep the whales safe and then keep the fishermen fishing, because that's their livelihood. And so we're working closely with fishermen because we don't want to, we're not necessarily like saying, oh, you need to do this. Like, we want to say, okay, does this work for you? Like, it's more of a collaborative approach. So this project is really interesting. And I'm hoping that we can continue to test gear outside of the normal Dungeness crab fishing season with an experimental fishing permit. So that's all TBD. We'll find out in the next couple months. But yeah, this project is really cool too, because we're also partnering with OPC CDFW and local fishermen. And I was connected with side personal note, but I was connected with the Sanctuary Foundation when I was at OPC because I managed this project from the OPC side and met my current boss through that. So that was kind of cool. So it's kind of another full circle moment for me. But it's more fun to be on like the implementation side of these projects than the other side for me personally. So that's whale conservation. We also focus on restoration. I'm not too plugged in with the restoration sides of things quite yet, just because some of our projects are giants. So we focus on coral restoration mostly. And we have a really large restoration project in the Florida Keys, which is called Mission Iconic Reefs. And it's actually the largest coral restoration project in North America, which is really cool. And so we have a whole team that works like specifically on Mission Iconic Reefs. So I haven't had much involvement with that project quite yet. We're also working on building capacity for coral restoration on St. Thomas in the US Virgin Islands. So this is a project I've been working on a lot recently, and we're actually releasing a request for proposals to go out on Monday. And with that project, hopefully we'll be able to give funding to different agencies or organizations working directly in St. Thomas to kind of help move restoration efforts along there. Because historically all the restoration efforts were kind of focused more on St. Croix and other islands and not St. Thomas. So there's a real need for restoration there. And hopefully in the next year to 3 years, we'll have some projects that are building capacity and then also implementing restoration and starting stuff like this photo, like coral outplanting. We're also starting to move towards kelp restoration. We haven't really done much on that front yet. So we're scoping different ways that the foundation could kind of assist sanctuary sites across the West Coast in kelp restoration efforts. We have a few ongoing projects though that are a little bit smaller that aren't like actually restoration implementation projects, but they're more of like the science behind it. We worked with the Greater Farallones Association to work on, and they're creating a report on the best practices for monitoring kelp cover with like aerial imagery and drones and stuff like that. So that'll be cool to see the results from that. And then we're also working on a project with NOAA Fisheries and Pew Charitable Trust on a submerged aquatic valuation project. So we're looking at like kelp, seagrasses, and carbon sequestration through there. So all that is ongoing, but we're hoping to kind of expand our work in the kelp restoration side of things. And then that brings me to our third kind of mission area of the conservation program, which is marine debris removal. And so this is obviously what my background is. So I was happy that, that the foundation is involved in stuff like this. And the foundation's marine debris removal kind of first started with Goal Clean Seas Florida Keys. And that's their first well-established program. And basically through Goal Clean Seas Florida Keys, which is hard to say really fast, we fund different dive operators in the Keys to go out and remove marine debris that's underwater. So since Hurricane Irma happened in the Keys in 2017, there had been a lot of lost traps. There's actually spiny lobster fishery in the Keys as well, and crab traps and some other debris. And so there was a real need to kind of like put money into removal efforts and cleanup efforts. And so that's how Goal Clean Seas Florida Keys was established. And basically we work with dive operators in the Keys, and they go out and we pay them for their removal dives and their scoping dives. And they have picked up a lot of debris since then. I should have put in the amount that we've removed since it started, but I did not. But anyway, so that project's ongoing and it's really great. And we're also working on a pilot project to see if we can figure out the logistics on how to recycle that fishing gear. So we're putting together a plan for a bin program so that fishermen could directly drop off their end-of-life fishing gear, or like Goal Clean Seas dive operators can drop off the gear that they removed, the fishing gear that they picked up in a cleanup, and then so that it'll go to recycling instead of just being disposed of. So that's also in the works right now. And then Goal Clean Seas Channel Islands is also fairly new. We've been piloting it for the past 2 years or so. And it's basically modeled off of Goal Clean Seas Florida Keys, where we want to engage local lobstermen and tourism operators like island packers in removal efforts. And so that's my goal, is to kind of grow this project, grow the Gold Clean Seas Channel Islands one, and especially include the research station, and just kind of see if we can make a more broader regional like monitoring and removal program. Just combine forces basically. So so I'm really excited about that, and just to see how it grows in the next couple of years. Previously, other Channel Islands Gold Clean Seas projects have just done a few cleanups at Chinese Harbor on Santa Cruz and Yellowbanks on Santa Cruz. And I hope that we can kind of expand that. And so, yeah. And then we're also scoping Gold Clean Seas at other sites. So Olympic Coast up in Washington, Flower Garden Banks, which is in the Gulf off of Texas. There's a lot of like underwater heavy machinery there that needs to be removed. And then also in Monterey Bay, there's some trap retrieval programs that we're looking into as well. And then this picture on the bottom is from a recent cleanup we did. We might have had a few CI students on this one actually, but the cool thing about being in a nonprofit that I've noticed is we have the opportunity to work with just so many different partners. So like not just state and federal agencies or other nonprofits, but also corporations. And so for example, recently we were approached by this clothing company called United by Blue and Corona, the beer company, who said like, hey, we have some money to spend. You guys have marine debris programs. Like, can we plug this into your program and like have some additional cleanups with the goal of removing 50,000 pounds of marine debris, or of trash in general. And so we decided to go for it. And we did 2 cleanups on the Santa Cruz Island, one at Chinese and one at Yellowbanks, where we used island packers, and then Santa Barbara Adventure Company came out to help participants kayak to the shore. And it was really great. We ended up removing like 2,500 pounds of trash, I think for both days. Most of it was lobster traps, of course. We also did the same thing in Florida, and we used some of our Gold Clean Seas participants and partners to do cleanups there as well. So I just wanted to highlight that. It's just cool to be able to work with, like Corona and get people out there. And so kind of brings me to my next slide, which is future opportunities for students. So if you are interested in doing like a future island beach cleanup through Gold Clean Seas Channel Islands, I'm going to be using Santa Barbara Channel Keepers volunteer lists for notices of future cleanup opportunities. So you can go ahead and sign up with them if you're interested to be put on the list, and then you'll kind of get an email blast when that opportunity comes available. Or I still plan to use, if you guys want, Santa Rosa Island Research Station's social media account, because we got a lot of good responses from that as well. So I hope to kind of make this like a more regular thing. I'd love to have students come out, and people that, don't normally get the chance to go to the island and help clean up trash. I feel like since we can take a boat to some of these closer sites, it could be a little bit easier than hiking in on Rosa and stuff. So yeah, that's just coming down the pipeline, hopefully. And then also later this year, I think maybe in the fall semester, we're going to have a internship on the conservation program. Not quite sure what that looks like yet. I know we have funding for it and it's pretty flexible, but basically you'd work with me, I think. And then the internship announcement will be posted on the foundation social media if you're following that. And then I will also share it with Russ so he can send it out to all the students and stuff. And with that, I think that's all I have. And yeah, you could always email me if you want and take any questions. And I'll stop sharing.
Thank you very, very much, Michaela. Great presentation, and so cool to see the ARC and all your stuff. The whale conservation stuff is really interesting because I was involved with some of that with folks from Marine Mammal Center and all those Dungeness issues in the Bay Area and Gulf of the Farallones. And it's cool to hear you talking about that type of gear, because I remember us talking about how those studies needed to happen. Like this was like 9 years ago. So it's so great to see that continuing. My question might be related to your grad school stuff, which sounded like it was a really great opportunity. What was the best thing about grad school, the biggest challenge about grad school? And if you could talk to yourself before you started, What's
Ooh,
the one thing that you would want to tell yourself?
that's good. Okay, the best thing, I think, oh, there's my dog in the background. The best thing was I made a lot of really great friends that I'm still friends with today. I think that's definitely the best. Also, just the connections I kind of made along the way, and was also very valuable. I wouldn't have heard about the Sea Grant Fellowship, for example, if I didn't go to graduate school, and that kind of also was a big one on my career path. Did you say what was the worst thing also?
Yeah, or just like the most challenging. Yeah.
Yeah, the most challenging was I also like I worked 2 jobs while taking classes and trying to write a thesis, but I do not recommend that. Like if I went back, I would try to find myself funding for the full grad program, not just partially. I probably wouldn't rush it, but then again, it made sense that I rushed it because I had this marine debris project that I could use that data, and like it made sense. But then I kind of wish I waited a little bit longer just so I could maybe like find a different advisor, or an advisor that was more interested in my research interests instead of just kind of picking the first one that picked me kind of thing. So that's what I would change. But overall, I would still, I don't regret it, you know, like I'm glad that I did it, even though it was painful at times, as Aspen can also understand.
Very, very good and very important points. Are there questions that people have for Michaela? Go ahead and just jump in.
Also, really quick, I just want to shout out, Erin is here. She also works at the foundation. She's our operations manager. So Erin and I work really closely all the time on different project stuff and contracts. So just want to give Erin a little shout out. Cool, no questions.
Somebody's got a question out there.
As someone that, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, great. As someone that was sort of, you know, working through college and trying to figure out if grad school was right for them, what was something that helped you in undergrad to get ready for grad school?
Yeah, that's a good question. Honestly, I think like my time spent on the islands, like actually out in the field, like working on projects, like, because then when I got to grad school, I realized like a lot of the people in my cohort hadn't even really had other jobs outside of, or really field opportunities. They went to like these fancy schools, like, you know, UCs and Duke and stuff, but they were in a classroom. Like they didn't really have that kind of field experience that I was lucky enough to have. And I think that's because I went to, you know, such a small CSU, and like I feel like that really kind of put me ahead in some ways and gave me like a leg up, just in terms of experience that I had, and just like the knowledge of, you know, who works on what. Like before even going to grad school, I knew like what the Park Service does and TNC and all these players, you know, and how they all kind of work together. So I think that was really valuable.
So I have a quick question about you. It sounds like for the most part, your opportunities basically led to another opportunity along your path. Did you find that that was typically organic? So like it was just like literally one project almost led into the next project, or did you find yourself oftentimes still kind of chasing that opportunity, like emailing the right person or reaching out at the right time for the right reason, sort of thing? Or was it just more natural, and it just kind of was fortunate that the projects kind of built on top of each other?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I was a little bit of, like, very lucky in a lot of ways, especially with my current job, because I remember when the foundation was kind of scoping for the Cold Clean Seas in the Channel Islands, they called me, or they reached out to me, and this was like in 2018 or so, maybe before I even went to grad school, I don't remember. So I remember talking with the person that has my current job now, and just like all about the islands. And then I met them again when I was at OPC, because OPC was a funder for the Gear Innovations project. And so they just kind of kept popping up. And I think it's really about just like keeping connections and making those connections. And then once, like, if an opportunity does present itself and you think you're a good fit, like throw your name in the hat and just kind of see what happens. But also like, yeah, with the Sea Grant Fellowship, I went into that just kind of like, I have no idea where I'm going to end up. It's just a year of my life. Like I'll move wherever. I know that what I don't want to do, but I don't know what I kind of want to focus on for my career. So just kind of having that open mind of like, oh, I could try this for a little bit and then try that. Like that was really beneficial as well.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think taking advantage of that flexibility in that kind of periods in your life, especially when you just finish up undergrad or just finish up grad school, I would concur. It opens up a lot of doors for you. So
yeah, especially even like I mentioned the Argentine ant eradication project. Like that's not something I would normally like want to have a career in, you know, but now I don't know, it was that also like I learned so much, and even if it's just a short-term temporary job, like you're going to learn something. And yeah.
And beyond the specific subject matter, for people who are really interested about like work preparedness and like opportunity, the reality is from like employers' perspective and other things, if you can show, especially if you're interested in like field work in general or working as a team, like if you can demonstrate that you can work hard, communicate well, accomplish goals, get along with people, make strong connections, like regardless of whatever the specific project is, that's going to have great value for you.
Yes.
Did anybody else have anything that they'd like to ask or comment on before we wrap up this evening? Alrighty, in that case, Michaela, thank you again so much. I am always just blown away by the information in these sessions, but I think particularly today, I really appreciated all of your insight, especially from someone from CSUCI. That was really, really neat to hear your perspective. So I just thank you so much for your time today and coming out and speaking with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And what's next, Genoa?
Oh, yes. A couple of things. Thank you, Russ. So a couple of things. Our last speaker series is in 2 weeks. And we will hear from a couple of our interns at the research station. So just kind of continuing on with our interns here to wrap up the series. And then before that, though, I did want to just direct our students to an internship opportunity that we'll have up on our Padlet this evening. It is for the Ventura U.S. Fish and Wildlife. It's a biology internship over the summer for 5 months. It starts in June. The deadline to apply is going to be at midnight on the 22nd of April. So make sure that you get to our Padlet under student opportunities. There's an intern opportunities tab. So if you just click on the link, it'll take you directly to the site with all of that information that you need for qualifications and all of that good stuff.
And Michaela actually sent that to me. So that's part of this whole, on the same theme, learning, taking advantage of the opportunities in front of you. And when you learn about things, follow up and pursue them. So there are opportunities out there.
All right, folks, thank you again so much. Whether you tuned in here on YouTube or if you were here this evening, we appreciate your time. And we hope to see you in future events and maybe out on the islands as well. Thank you again so much.
Thanks.